Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of 10,000 Heroes. I'm your host, Ankur Shah Delight. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of 10,000 Heroes. Today's episode is an interview with Jason Taylor, who's a 5 Elements acupuncture guy. I was just thinking about Jason this morning because I heard a podcast over the weekend, which was really fantastic. It was an episode of How I Built This with Guy Raz, and he interviewed R.J. Scaringi? I don't know how to pronounce this guy's name. R.J. something, who is the founder of Rivian, an electric car company. And this guy was really an amazing character, the sense I got from the interview. But he was just so focused on impact. And, you know, it's a podcast interview. He's putting on a certain persona. But it really seemed to me that this guy is living his life. In every decision he's making, it's focused on the impact he can make in terms of our relationship with the planet, and particularly for him, it's greenhouse gas emissions and getting automobiles to be electrified. But that level, I was like, shit, impact. What is the great impact that I'm focused on? And so I had this whole brainstorming session about it this morning. And of course, there's a lot of impact that I am focused on, and all my work does lead to. But I realized that it's not. I'm not just focused on impact. I make a lot of decisions and I do a lot of things that are not about impact. They're about having fun. It's really about expressing my creativity. And it's easy to feel judgmental. It was easy for me to self-judge myself about that. But when I thought back to Jason's episode and this whole seasons of life and different personality types, it's like, all right, maybe there's people that it really works for them to be just narrowly focused on impact. And I have a ton of admiration for that. But just to flow with who I am and who I've always been, that's just never been it. You know, that it's just, for me, it's been about presence and fun and creativity and community, and impact is a part of that, but it's not the whole thing. So that's one way in which I've already benefited from this interview. And Jason is an amazing person, did an amazing job, and I'm excited to share his journey with you. Part of the the project is take people, ask them about their purpose, understand how they got here, how the community can support them. But in this case, you had sent a response to one of the newsletters. Mm-hmm. And if I remember correctly, it was challenging this notion I had that we're all seeking meaning and purpose and community from a kind of 5 elements acupuncture perspective.
Yeah.
So maybe you could
Well, I wouldn't say it was necessarily challenging. Maybe it was a challenge, it was a clarification. So I think that people find purpose in different ways, right? So for some people, it is really about community building. They want to be around other people, and that's what can help them provide a purpose. But there are other types of people who they might find purpose in just being by themselves, climbing a mountain.
Yeah,
or
I see.
Being a researcher. So and on their own, they like to do their own thing. They're into their minds, and that's what provides them purpose. And the 5 element system is one system within the acupuncture world, or Taoism, where it's really, I prefer to call it 5 seasons. So there's different seasons there's seasons in nature, obviously, but there's just seasons within ourselves. And some of us tend to hang out more in one season or another. So you can think of a spring season or wood element that is about birth. It's about energy going up and outward. So some people hang out in that a lot. They're more like in your face. They're maybe tend towards frustration as a negative component, or anger as an emotion associated with it. And then there's some people who live in the fire element, which is about joy and happiness. And to me, that's what your definition of purpose was, more of that fiery thing about community, bringing people together. Mm-hmm. Summer, right? So that you think of hanging out with your family. You think of it as, in an energetic feeling. It's like being on the beach with your family and friends in the summer and party. It's that's a more of a fire summer type of element.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, and then there's
Not surprising.
so there's 5 seasons in this worldview.
Okay.
And the 5th one is the late summer, the harvest season,
Oh.
or the earth element. And so in that one, it's kind of about like more like just, you can think of that feeling of like that late summer where the light changes a little bit and the abundance of food and sitting back and you can feel that things are changed, so you're going to change soon, but they haven't started to change.
Kind of in that right now.
Yeah, I think we're a little bit past it right now, but like
Yeah.
we're just on the other edge of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like August, September feel, and now we're moving into the autumn, the fall season of letting go, right? So things are dropped. Apples, we live in apple country, so apples are dropping off the trees so fast. Leaves are dropping, and that's the energy of kind of like it's a decline. But and then emotion associated with that is kind of like often grief, which where things you have to let go, and then that moves into winter with the mystery, the coming into the darkness, and then that moves into spring again. And there's a cycle going around. We know it because we live in the world, and so that's the macrocosmic, the big picture. But then we can use that example. They call it like the generating cycle in acupuncture, Eastern medicine. And that generating cycle happens within us too. And you can think of, literally our life, we're born, spring energy, we're born.
Yeah.
We become young adults, fire, summer season. We are middle age, where I am now. That's kind of like starting to get into the harvest season. You have kids, things are like, going, and you get it, in your, I don't know what it is now because its ages seem to change. Let's say 60s, 70s. You're getting into the letting go, the autumn season of your life, and then we all die, and then we're into and then that cycle starts again in some way.
So the season earlier, you said people have different ways of approaching this, and like
right.
From what you can observe, like I'm in this like fire world. I'm like, yeah, we need all this like togetherness and community and fun and creativity, and that's where like my meaning and purpose comes from. And someone else might have a different.
Someone else might have a different one. So yeah, again, it's like an easy one. Is can you think of someone who sits more in the water element, the winter element. So for them, they might be more reserved. They might tend towards wanting to do things on their own and getting purpose from that versus like community and those things. Like for instance, like the hardest question that you had asked me that like I was like, is like, well, ask people how can they help? And for me,
I was thinking about that this morning. I was like, I can't imagine Jason answering that.
Yeah, so for me, I'll save it for the end. But for me, that was like, I was like, oh yeah, like that's a challenge for me. And I also want to say that we have all of these elements within ourselves, right? Also, it's not a clear cut type of thing, but kind of we hang out in one place or another place.
Yeah. So I had 2 questions. I guess, but to address that, the idea that we have it all within ourselves, and this like very old school, I don't know, maybe understanding or just worldview.
Mm-hmm.
What's the utility of it? And I go back to all the other like ancient epistemological and divination systems, like you think of astrology or like Ayurvedic dosha system or the tarot, where it's like clear to me as a modern computer guy that all these things are in us. Like like in the tarot, someone throws a tarot card. It's like any tarot card they throw, I'm gonna relate to it,
right?
If I'm open enough, right?
Yeah.
In every one of these seasons you talk about, clearly like there's one that's predominant in me, but like I can relate to all of them. So what's the utility of putting them out there like that? How do we learn from? How does it benefit us?
So it's an explanatory mechanism, right? Like it's a story. All these things are stories, right? And what's so beautiful about it is that I can relate to it with what's happening around. Like I can see it. I can see nature. I can see seasons that happen. I can see different natural cycles. And if you really look at them all, even like the day, you can think of how a day progresses. this is they call it a law in 5 element acupuncture. This is a law, and you can see it in everything because it's there in everything, but it's not. But it's not everything, and everything. I feel like with the Taoist, it's always like, everything. There's always a yeah, but, or there's nothing is clear. And the way that they came up with this was first noticing the duality, right? So like yin and yang, there's a duality. There's sun, there's moon.
Mm-hmm.
There's shade, there's, sun again. There's all these different dualities. Everything was a dual. And then they're like, well, that does work. And what is there another way to like explain it so that it can be more useful?
Mm-hmm.
So then that's where they came around the 5 element system, as noticing it in nature and then noticing it within our, so that's a macrocosm, and then in the microcosm in ourselves, in our people. So how do I think I'm answering your question, but you can clarify if I'm not. But a way that I use it, so if someone comes and sees me, and I'm an acupuncturist, so someone comes, and I do actually this with people for the first half hour, 45 minutes, sometimes longer. So I just talk with them. And they're going to tell me, often it's some sort of physical pain or emotional pain, or often it's pain related, or a reason they come to see me. And that's interesting, and I help them with that. However, I'm first trying to figure out where do they fit into this system. So, someone has back pain, just as an example, and it's not always, but then they have back pain, they come in, they seem very tight, they're fearful. There's these correspondences. Okay, so those are things that make me think of the water element, the winter. Something's kind of out of balance. So I use that as a part of my diagnosis on how I'm going to treat them and help them. And how I treat and help them, I use acupuncture needles, obviously. However, I also I call them, well, one of my teachers called them word needles. So I'll say something and see how someone responds to it. And are there ways that by using my language and my words, I can help them kind of move out of this emotional state, which very often then is a help for their physical state.
Yeah.
An example like just popped into my head has nothing to do with my work, but I was talking to someone last week, and they were, I'm trying to get them to join a board that I'm on. And they're like, well, I don't know, I'm really blunt, and I'm bossy. And I was like, hold on, like, I've worked with you, I know you, and I find that's actually a gift. You bring clarity to things, and you're direct, and that's what we need in this board. Someone who's not just gonna like walk around. And then we continue talking. At the very end of the conversation, she stopped me and she said, like, I just want to thank you. I always have thought of myself as this like negative, person who's always bossy and coming in. And you just said that clarity, and like that just like hit me like a needle. Oh, I shouldn't say needle, but that just hit me in a way, and I never thought of that before. Thank you. I feel like a relief from that.
Oh wow.
So those are the types of things that, and so I would have put her in like the wood, the spring element, direct energy coming out, and she was seeing herself, in kind of a negative way, and that there's a gift to that being direct, it can be a gift, and that can change her physiology by thinking about that differently. So
yeah,
does that answer your question? And
yeah. Yeah. And then that leads to like the other question, which is about the temporality of it. So there's a universal part, which we're all born in this spring world because that's associated with birth in the system, and die in the one that's associated with death. But are there like seasons in the sense that I might shift from one element to another over the course of time because of things that happen to me? Or
absolutely, like it's a spiral. Like it's not a drag. There's spirals happening all the time. We're spinning around these things, and so an event might happen in your life, like someone dies. Like you could be young, you could be 10 years old, and someone really important to you dies, and you kind of spiral into this grief that's associated with death and then and that's normal, and there's there's a reason that we go through grief, and then we enter this mystery that a birth, and you become happy again into the summer. And for some people in some instances it can get stuck in there, and again, that's where I feel like I come and can help somebody like move past that with medicine, natural medicine.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking of how I grew up, and I think there was always this value. I mean, I don't know where it came from, 'cause I don't necessarily think it was my parents, which is the obvious thing, but just like I always thought like I should be happy, and the you know, obviously I've had many moments in my life where I was not happy,
Yeah.
and some lasted
Yeah.
a long time, you know, like many months, and some were just little moments.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea of having a framework that was like, oh yeah, this is just part of it, and this is going to change, and I still might take some actions to explore different ways I could be in that moment, but rather than like this is a bad thing, to be like, oh yeah, this is just a different kind of way of being in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something we could learn?
I think so. Actually, I'm not sure I fully understand that. Can you rephrase it?
Yeah. So, I throw a lot of parties. I have a lot of guests come to my house. I really enjoy it. Sometimes, like the day after my best friend leaves, or a bunch of people leave, I'll just be like super low and really drained, and maybe like not even be able to work, and just be like really distracted and just really bummed out.
Mm-hmm.
And I could experience a layer of guilt of like, why am I not able to function normally, or why am I not myself today?
Mm-hmm.
Or if I have the memory and the perspective to think about a system like this or some other system that just helps me realize like there's all these different types of energy in the world that you experience. It doesn't always have to be the same one. And when something else comes, we can just embrace it and figure out like, oh, what can I do today, or how do I flow with whatever I'm feeling today, rather than try to impose this notion of who I was yesterday.
So I'll even go further, and like a party is a perfect example of five. Like you go through the 5 elements when you throw a party. There's some mystery, and you're like, I want to throw a party. Birth, the idea. You like plan. You get the party ready.
Yeah.
Party happens. Fire. Happy. Everyone's here. They're having fun. Harvest season. Those last 10 people who are always there at the party are there. The after party. Things are feeling down, and you might have some really great conversations at that time with those that energy. And then that last person walks out the door, and you're gonna feel like, oh man, I feel a little grief. That was really fun. That was a great party. And then you move back, and then so taking it even a step farther, maybe a little bit outside of the party, but that is just how things work. That's why it's called a natural law for acupuncture. And you can't skip from like spring to grief or to autumn in this. So if you did that, you wouldn't have the party. You'd have the plan the party, and the party didn't happen, and then I guess you could that would be sad, and you'd be sad about that. But
yeah, that seems just like the part of what our society dealt with COVID.
Right.
There's like a lot of party planning. And then this thing happened, and it's like,
what do we do?
We didn't get the party. We went straight to the grave. And
and that is when disease often occurs, right? Or illness, because again, like from like an emotional or something gets stuck, and it's not moving in the right direction because of an event of something's going on. And then that's often people get sick when they try to skip some of these things. Like, I mean, sleep is a perfect example. We need sleep. Like you think of the water time of the day-night cycle, people don't get sleep. So I mean, half the people that I see, they're sick not because of whatever they come to me for, but because they're not getting enough sleep. Because can I help them sleep, and then their back pain will go away. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's cool. That's why I love what I do. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so that was kind of a preface. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get to the main event. Here we are at this tea party of the future. Get some more water. And in this future culture that we are creating right now, this moment, it's totally legit and expected and awesome when you meet someone to be like, hey, why are you here? What's your purpose? What have you understood about your role in the human society and the planet we're on?
And I've been thinking about that since I got this from you. And looking back at my life. So like purpose, and it can be different at different times in your life. But is there like a thread for me of what my purpose is? And I think I came up with something, and that's helping or facilitating people to love nature is a lot of what I've done in my history. So as a child, I was the one who would like riding bikes, catching frogs, being outside, drag my friends away from the computer games. Um, that type of person as a child.
This is in Toronto.
This was in Toronto, a little bit north of Toronto. Yeah, I grew up in a place called Barrie in Canada, and then I went off to university and I studied ecology. Was marine biology is what I wanted to do originally, and at that point I started working in a museum, and I would teach people about. I was an interpreter and that naturalist, teaching people about nature, and became really interested in those things. And again, this is like a thread of my life, which is going to take a different turn with acupuncture. But and then I became really interested in bats, like the flying kind. And I went and did a master's studying with this bat biologist, and he was cool. His name was Brock, and he was really open to different ways of thinking. And so I started in his lab as ecologist, ecology, but I became more interested in like how people think about bats and animals and all like the mythologies and the stories and all those things about them and their echolocation. There's so many fascinating things. So I went up to him and I was like, Brock, I'd like to switch and do something about education and using bats as a model on how you can incorporate different things, science, culture, into the science curriculum or the curriculum for the Ontario School Board. And he's like, okay, well, I won't get a pay. Okay, sure, go ahead. And he helped me with that. And that's what I did my master's thesis on, like wildlife as a teaching tool was the title. So again, teaching people about nature. When I graduated, I then started leading nature excursions for hotels and resorts. I started my own company, and I would set up nature programs for hotels. So when the guests come, they can go. I had staff. They would take people out on tours and things like that, bird walks, and then I ended up my girlfriend moved down to Washington D.C. So I thought, oh well, good, because I'll go. I didn't end up with her, but met someone there who I'm married to now at my job there, which is at the Ecological Society of America. And there I started, so it was the Ecological Society of America. I started kind of as an education policy type person. And we developed an education office. And our main programs were mentoring students from that were not well represented in the field of ecology. So I worked with tribal colleges and historically black colleges and all different types of people to try to get them into ecology. So I set up mentorship programs. We ran field trips. We, did all these things with people and helping these people who hadn't had a lot of experience with nature or ecology, learn about it. And, some of them are now PhDs and really successful. So, again, pushing sort of for nature. And continued on down to, I didn't think I was going to give you my whole life story here, but here we go.
Yes,
here we go. So then moved down into, moved to Utah, and I worked, I was the director of a nonprofit there. It's called the Utah Society for Environmental Education. And again, so getting people interested in environment. There was a lot of...
Yeah, this is a very clear so far.
A lot, train the trainers and getting, leading tours and things like that. Moved back to DC, and there I became was more of an administrator at this point. So I helped develop a framework for environmental literacy that by OECD, the Organization of Economic
Cooperation and Development.
Yeah. So we did a framework for environmental literacy and how you can that could be applied. They had this test called Green at 15, where they were surveying what people knew about the environment and nature at 15 years old.
Mm.
But they didn't have a real clear framework. So we developed a framework for this. We hosted a thing at the National Press Club in DC. And but I was at that point I started to get kind of bored with this stuff. I think because I wasn't like one-on-one with people,
Yeah.
or I was more of like just developing things. And
that was for years. You were more in this policy.
Yeah, it was a slow like move, and that was sort of the end of it was there for me. And I'd had this experience years before where I got acupuncture, and I had these horrible sinus infections from about 15 to 30. And when I was 30,
15 years.
15 years. Yeah. At the get 2 or 3 a year, and tried all these different things. And the last I went to this doctor, and he was like a ear, nose, throat doctor. He said, "Well, we've done all these things. So I think the next step is going to be to cut out part of your sinus." And I thought, that does not sound good to me. And I think it was that day I like was walking back. This was at George Washington hospital in DC, and I was walking back to my office, and I saw this sign for acupuncture, and I said, "Well, it can't hurt." So I went in there.
Did you know anything about acupuncture?
Not at that time. So this was my first time in DC too. So this was like in 2005 or 6 or something like that. And I went and saw this woman. I remember her name, Sadie. Saw her 6, 7 times, and I have not had a sinus infection since, and that's 20 years at this point. So that had stuck with me. So these other things were going on, and I kept, then I started to do some of the other Eastern arts like Tai Chi and Qigong and meditation, and I was into these things and talking about acupuncture. And then it's at some of this point where I was kind of being disillusioned with my current career. Give credit to my wife. She's like, "Just shut up. Stop talking about this. Just go to acupuncture school. Fine. Go."
And is that something you've been talking about? Or
I've been talking about it. Yeah. And then she was like the extra push I needed. I was waffling, I was like, maybe I should do this. She's like, just go ahead, go do it. And so I did that. So now you might be wondering, like, well, what about this nature thing? But what I discovered in acupuncture school is that, again, this idea of like a macrocosm and a microcosm, right? Yeah. So now what I do more is helping people with their inner nature and connect. And like I say, I believe a lot of disease is about like just a stagnation, being stuck, things not moving, stuck in our minds, stuck in our bodies, and by using this brilliant system, I think, of the 5 elements, it's still nature-based medicine. And so I'm helping people on a different level through nature. So going back to like the purpose of just helping people, like I don't like necessarily the word helping people, facilitating connection to nature, be it outer nature. And I still do work with nonprofits and things in the environmental education world. And one-on-one with people, really helping them with their own nature. I mean, most of what I do is I mentioned like the words, right? Of course, I think acupuncture works. I'm an acupuncturist. However, that it's the acupuncture is a tool, right? And I think even more important are like this type of thing is partnership, like talking with someone, being right there with them, being present. Like how often do we get a chance to be fully present with someone?
Yeah.
And that's what people are surprised at when they come and see me. They expect I'm just going to put them on a table and throw in some needles. And I have like this type of conversation with someone. Yeah. And some people are like, no thanks. And most people like just come into it and they're like, oh my gosh, this feels great.
Yeah. There's two things I really want to follow up that with. But the first, just what you said, I've had so many talks with people where, again, it's similar. It's just like trying to talk and connect, and they're like, at the end of it, or in the middle, they're like, wow, this is like therapy.
Right. Yeah.
I'm like, this is actually just real conversation.
Right.
But for in our culture, for many people, that is reserved for therapy. Yeah. And it's like you can't actually have a real vulnerable, like let the guard down connection with someone.
Right.
Somehow it's not seen to be
right.
normal.
And like the number one, this was a few years ago, so I'm not sure if it's still, but the number one complaint about healthcare system is that no one listens.
Yeah.
So you go see a doctor. How much time do you get with that doctor? Do they do anything? You're right.
Yeah, I mean, they get like usually it's like 15 minutes
If you're lucky,
because their
you're
time
right.
is
Yeah,
so
yeah,
valuable, right?
right. So, is it? I mean, so their time is so valuable. What does that mean?
Well, I mean, just from
Yeah,
the simple
right.
like
Yeah,
external
yeah,
economics of it, they're being paid
yeah,
X $100,000 a year, and they have to bill at a certain rate. So
right, right.
from the point of view of like the accountants,
Yeah,
like it's not going to work out if that doctor spends 16 minutes with the patient, right? They've got to spend 15 or less.
yeah. So that's the model that doesn't work, right? So, anyways, yeah. So the people get listened to. People get touched, like I'm doing acupuncture, I'm like palpating, moving, So, so I work with a lot of seniors, and some of them are like never get touched. It's part of it too, right?
Yeah.
Like these, again, this is simple stuff. Most of what I do, I help people sleep. I help people drink more water, teach them breathing techniques, and I provide acupuncture. But like these things are all tied in together.
Yeah.
Um,
Going back to the nature
mhm.
part, we live in a society where we people have this illusion that they're not part of the natural world, and we're able to preserve that illusion because we're living in boxes that like insulate us from the natural world, and all the technology and all that stuff. But even before all the whole like smartphone in your pocket thing, we just like live like really cut off for the most part. Is that part of what you mean with connecting with nature?
I do, and in cutting it off, and we cut it off in many different ways. So yes, we cut it off by like how we live, where we live, with like, I mean, light. just think about light. How many years have we evolved without light at night? Like our whole human history until, I mean, for electric light, 100-ish years ago, and even fire was not that long ago in terms of our history. And I lost my thought here, but so what was your question again?
About being connected with nature.
Yeah, so that's one way we get disconnected with nature, and then another way I think is that we are again our microcosmic nature. So we get disconnected from outer nature. Some people live in cities. I lived in cities most of my life, and you don't there's nature around us that we can cultivate and appreciate, but we're cut off. We also have all these other things going on, and but within ourselves we cut off our mind and our body, and more often we don't pay attention to our body, nature. Okay, our body is nature. Think of all the crazy amazing things that are happening naturally in our body that we're not even thinking about right now. What's your spleen doing? What's your gallbladder doing? These things are all happening in our bodies right now, and our bodies send us signals to our brain saying, hold on, there's something going on here, you should slow down, or you need to get rest, you need to get sleep. And our disconnect is we're like, I don't care, I've got this little pain in my knee, I'm just going to push through it, and I'm not going to listen to it. And that pain in your knee might be an indication that you have, I'm just making this up, but like you have a heart condition or something, so it's like your brain and your body saying slow down, and it's sending you these signals. I mean, it's kind of like if a car is a perfect example. The check engine light comes on in your car.
Oh man,
There's something.
I'm guilty here. Okay. I'm totally guilty.
So there's something going on in your car, and you don't know what it is, and you can just put a piece of tape over that check engine light and never see it again. But whatever that issue was, it's going on, and it will probably end up in something bad happening.
Yeah,
real bad. Or you can take it to a mechanic. You can like do a diagnostic. You can find, oh, it was just your gas cap is a little bit loose, and we'll tighten it. But if that gas cap wasn't tightened, who knows what's going to happen after that. So that's a disconnect, right? That's a human it's a nature disconnect, but on a human level.
Yeah. So something you said got me really excited, which is it possible, or have you, I mean, I guess both questions, is it possible, one, and then have you personally, to generate an awareness, like enough specific awareness of the parts of your body where you know what your spleen is doing, as opposed to like, oh, something's going on here?
Yeah. So it's a yes and no question answer. So there are. I mean, I think that there are people. I'm not at this level who can actually determine those things in their own bodies. It takes a lot of work, self cultivation. These correspondence I talked about with the seasons.
Yeah.
Go back to that. Well, each of those seasons or those elements also has corresponding organ systems. Okay, so we use the wood spring associated with the liver and gallbladder, and so if someone is out of sorts in their, let's say they're getting angry all the time, and their liver energy, their spring energy is out of sorts. So if I'm with someone and they're like, just I can tell I'm mad all the time. This is something that's indicating to me an issue with their liver system, which is the real organ of the liver, but it's also more than that. It's hard for me to even sometimes it's hard for me to think about talking in this acupuncture role because my background is like hard science, and then now I'm like in this kind of different explanatory system.
But it's not based on the same like observational principles of like what you can observe when you dissect someone. It's based on some other like a functional understanding.
It's a functional understanding, and so the idea is that there's these. So the liver or the organs are part of call it a meridian system, which are like these rivers that are connected to those organs, and
those rivers are not things that we can see when we dissect someone.
No, they aren't.
Yeah.
But there's some people who think they can.
I think it's worth kind of going into this because you did go from a hard science into this thing. That could you explain in a little bit more detail? Like I studied Ayurveda, so I have some understanding of what that word functional means. But to someone who hasn't, could you explain what that means? And then also like, why does this make sense to you? Given that like the narrative in our society is like, there's like superstition, and then that superstition is replaced by science.
Right. Well, the second answer is everything is a story, right? It's an explanatory systems, right? And some of them resonate more or less with us. And this system resonates with me. This 5-element system, I have to be honest that the more traditional acupuncture system, it's called the traditional Chinese medicine, does not resonate with me. And it's a different way of diagnosing. Often we come up with the same types of plans, but that story, that's not a story that I really resonate with. I resonate with this more seasonal story. And there are other stories of acupuncture. There are science stories of acupuncture. So like, for there are lots of people around fMRIs and all these things and have shown that yes, acupuncture is effective in the science world.
But that's a little different, and that's what the distinction I was getting with the functional idea is that it's still in functional medical systems of this type, like in Ayurveda, their results are still demonstrable, and they have explanatory power. They're just not based on external observation in the way that Western science is.
Yes, as well, but there are. I'll say with acupuncture, there've been many experiments, but I mean, there's problems with all those things, like doing double blind tests, and like so they do sham acupuncture points in different places, and it's just stepping back. I guess I would say that for me, I'm not held to. I don't feel like I need to know why it works.
Right.
And I've seen it.
That's the critical difference. Is that like in Western science, we're really concerned with why it works.
Yeah.
And we want to see results, right? But in this one, what you've come to is you've seen the results, and you're like, all right, the story works for me. It has explanatory power.
Right.
I don't have to know the mechanism.
It works for me. I don't necessarily need to know the mechanism. I don't think I can know everything, and that's enough for me.
Yeah.
Not for everybody. Not even for all acupuncturists. Lots of acupuncturists want to know, and they have like you ask some acupuncturists question, they would have a different answer.
Yeah.
Does that get to?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
totally. Yeah, and I think that's important. It's for all of us to to understand. There's things that like, I mean, I really, the part of modern science, it's like predictable results of experiments. What is the explanatory power of this theory? If I do this, what's going to happen? I really value that.
Right. I
It's
mean, we've
really
got
important.
lights, we've got
Yeah,
cameras, we got,
yeah.
yeah.
And it really helps keep us away from superstition that I think it could be really negative. And I just think of beliefs we have around other people, like these people are bad and they have like they're less than these other people. And it's nice to have a way of being like, dude, that's bullshit. And I think it's also, for me, I find it relaxing that sometimes things work if they can work predictably and I can understand what I need to do to get something to work predictably. I don't necessarily need to know why. And that's obviously that we're doing that every day with the technology we use, because nobody understands most of the technology they use. But they're like, they know if I press this button, I'm going to get like a heart emoji, and that's good enough for me, and I'll do that.
Yeah, you made me think of like an interesting little fact about acupuncture in the United States is this: one of the first acupuncturists here, his name was Ted Kapchak, and he wrote one of the first books. It's called "The Web That Has No Weavers," and it's still used in acupuncture schools as like a way to explain acupuncture. However, in his later years, and he's still alive and active, he now directs placebo studies at Harvard. And so he does research into placebo effect and the nocebo effect, which is even crazier to me. So that's like if you go to, when they're doing these placebo studies, and so you're getting a pill that's for heart disease or whatever it is, and they're saying, and they'll tell you what the possible side effects of it are, and people taking the placebo will get those negative side effects, like in such a way that in a case I just read about, they were worried that someone was going into septic shock. And this was their mind controlling their body because someone had told them with a word that you might get these negative side effects.
But it was effective enough that they weren't just worried they were going into septic shock. Like their body
they were
was
having physiological, demonstrable. They pulled them off of this study because they were worried. And so there's just a paper out on nocebo effect recently from Kapchak.
And so that's like the negative side of the placebo effect.
It's a negative
so
side.
It's a side effect.
Yeah. So if you, again, it's this power of words, going back to that, telling someone that she was direct or had clarity, brought clarity to a situation versus being blunt and bossy. Like, what's the difference between those two words, or how you hold that in your body and your mind, and then what cascading physiological change can you do to your body, both negatively, if you're like, oh, no one likes me, I'm blunt, I'm just bossy, I'm come in and everyone, versus, oh yeah, I bring directness and clarity to this, and I'm helping these. So those changes of how we're feeling how we're feeling affect our bodies. In our mind, can affect our bodies. And that, I mean, to me, that's the trick of it all. An acupuncture needle in my leg affects my mind. It brings connection between my mind and my body. A word that I say to you that can connect your mind to your body. These are like, so that duality, I think you asked me a question about this a little bit ago. Like that's bringing this connection back, of getting back into the purpose of nature. That connection. How can we do that for people in a positive way? Because you can definitely also do it in a negative way.
Mm.
If I walk into the store and I'm in a bad mood and I tell like the cashier and I tell them to go to hell or something because they make a mistake, and then someone else comes in and their cashier is really mean to them, and then that person goes home and slaps their child, who's responsible for that, right? Is it like, or if I come in and I see the person is in a really bad mood and I make a joke and kind of like, and they, oh yeah, and then that person comes in, they do a joke for them, they go home and they hug their child. I mean, what's the difference between like those powers of those are just words or actions? We all, of course, can be in a bad mood or do those things, but bringing that presence to how we react and act, I think, is part of it all. And that's part of what I do in the treatment room, is helping people see those things, even if I don't tell them that's what I'm doing.
Yeah,
which I never do.
Wow. Wow. You're like kind of like a behind the scenes imp.
Yeah, one of my teachers called it like stealth shamanism. Right?
Yeah.
So because most people when they come to see me, they don't even want to, they don't care about, like, first of all, they just want to feel better, right?
Right.
Like, so that
Yeah.
they don't care. And they don't even want to know that, or that's my, again, that might be a wrong story for me, but so they want acupuncture, that's why they're there. So I give them acupuncture, and along with that acupuncture, I give them these other things.
Yeah, but there is something. There's an openness, uh, a level of vulnerability just because the body's not working well. But I think when we go to a medical practitioner, there is, and this is why people are so disillusioned, I think, with the modern medical system, because they go there and nobody listens to their story. I think there is part of it. It's like, okay, yeah, my liver's not working or I can't sleep, but I want to like, I do want to like be like, talk about it a little bit.
Yeah.
And maybe bitch about it a little bit, or maybe just get a little feedback or something. And so the fact that you actually allow that or encourage that, I think there's a need that maybe it's unspoken, but that's really being
absolutely.
And so they're receptive to what you say.
Yeah.
Because if they go to like, the yarn store, and are talking about their sleep, and then someone gives them some advice, they're just like, okay, thanks for your advice.
Well, that's I will also say too that I very rarely. Well, I mean, I do give advice, I guess, and more often, I ask questions, and you come up with their own. Like, you can't telling people what to do. It just doesn't work. I mean, it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
In most cases, although I have I call it a hydration schedule that I give to people. So how to drink water, and that is very prescriptive. It's like you drink water these times a day, and people love that also. It's a balance between, here's something that's direct that you can just follow the directions. Because I mean, I don't know. There's so much information out there. And I don't know, there was this book that I read way back in like grad school, I think. It's called The Thanatos Syndrome by Walker Percy. And I just remember this quote from it. And it's kind of a detective type story, and they're trying to figure things out. And the character says, this is not the age of information. This is the age of not knowing what to do. Because there's so much, all this information is there. What the heck do you do with it? I mean, you could, like, you have a health condition and you Google, pain in the liver.
Oh man,
what's going to come up, right?
Seems like a terrible.
And then even, does that help you in any way, right? Like, so, I don't know. There's just so much information that sometimes you just want someone to give you some clarity.
Yeah.
But the trick, the dance, and it's a dance, is you say, I can't just tell everyone what to do. People don't like that, right?
Yeah.
So you're like, question, and then often, like most of the time, 90% of it, like, oh yeah, that's right, I'm not really sleeping well. What could you do about that? Well, I do take my phone to bed and look at, YouTube till 1 a.m. Well, is that a good idea? Well, probably not. Well, what could you do about that? Well, I'll tell you what, for a week, I'm just going to not take my phone into the bedroom. And then they come back and like, well, how was your sleep? Oh man, I just can't believe it. My sleep is so great. Thank you so much. So I didn't actually tell them what to do. I just asked a lot of questions, help them come up with it themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're taking it to a really deep level. Like, I would have, personally, if I was like in a coaching thing, I would have asked the first couple of those questions and then been like, all right, dude, so you should blah, 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 blah. But you're just like going all the way there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And that's what I got out of acupuncture school there. The main teacher there, his name was Bob Duggan. And he's just amazing. And that was he was like Ted Kapchak, one of the first acupuncturists. And then now he was still an acupuncturist. However, he's the one who taught me to call it like healing presence, and like following the thread and questioning and not telling people what to do, and holding acupuncture not as the be all end all, but the tool that I employ as a health practitioner, but an Ayurvedic practitioner or a naturopath, like can also like serve you. And particularly in this system, in this idea of like this healing presence and this questioning, and helping you make those, again, going back to the purpose of nature, helping you come back to your true nature, your purpose, in a way, your health purpose. So I give great thanks to Bob, and it's funny, he died, and then I LinkedIn I never used, and I went back like 3 months after he had passed away to LinkedIn, and I logged in, and there was a note from him to me that he had written like not long before he passed away.
Whoa.
And it's just like, wow, that was a needle right to my heart. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hadn't heard from him like for a year or two, and then just a random, LinkedIn message from someone who's passed away. Yeah, yeah.
Ghost LinkedIn
Yeah,
message.
it was a ghost message.
Wow. Beautiful.
Yeah.
So you pretty much covered question 2, and question 1, and how did you come to know? You gave us the meandering path, which when I
yeah.
heard it is like, compared to many people's stories, is really not that meandering. You were just like consistently focused on connecting people to nature.
Yeah.
Just exploring these different ways of doing it.
Right. And but thank you for this question though, because I wasn't aware of that until I was really thinking about this question. And I had some different things. Like, I think the first thing is like helping people deal with pain, and it was like, I don't know, that's not really it. And then I spent some time thinking about it, and I was like, oh, then it became obvious. Oh yes. Nature.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Thank you for engaging. That's yeah. Great. That's rare. Okay. And so the third question, which we alluded to already,
yeah,
is like, we're part of this community, this podcast, this newsletter. There's it's actually kind of exploded in the last few weeks. So
Great.
There's maybe like, I don't know, 500 people involved now, or it was just 100.
Wow.
And so there's potentially like some people with a lot of goodwill and who are stoked about your story and excited a little bit by this journey into vulnerability of like, what if this community could do something for you, like what would it be? What do you?
Yeah, so it's a hard one for me. Like, it's that. So I thought a lot about this too, and I was like, the easy answer to me, what like that, and that felt most comfortable and less vulnerable. It's just like, well, send me a note that I love acknowledgement, that if I touched you in some way, let me know. That's something that helps me. It helps put like me do what I'm doing when I get the acknowledgement. Who gets acknowledged enough,
yeah.
really, right?
Yeah, that's really great. Yeah.
So that was one. But then, actually I listened to your last podcast with Melvin.
Oh yeah.
I listened to that yesterday. And that's when I was like, oh, there is one thing that's a big thing. But it's like, I don't know if can I ask, and that is, I would love to merge these things in a different way, and maybe even other things. So what I would love is ideas. I would love ideas on how to create kind of like a retreat center that would be here in the Olympic Mountains, that would have space for outdoor nature. For me, it could do an acupuncture office there, because I do actually think there is something about getting a healing in a natural setting. So you can beautiful views of the mountains as you're having this type of conversation. But then even bigger, a place people could come from afar to get this type of healing. Maybe not acupuncture directly, but I mean more of like some of the things that you do with your coaching programs, I think. So like, and it could involve movement. Like I love Qigong, so that could be part of it. Movement, conversations, but for that to really happen, there needs to be a space.
Yeah.
So that's a big. I don't know how to go about getting that space. It's not in my financial wheelhouse at the moment, and there could be partnerships or things.
It sounds like part of the vision is there would be other people involved.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that was the thing that came to me, that was uncomfortable. I don't like to ask people for things. However,
even when the thing is for the benefit of
everybody, that's my squawk, right?
Yeah.
It's like I do well on this like one-on-one type of play, dance, conversation, and like groups and other people, like that's where it's more difficult for me. So those are my thoughts anyway.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And even the first one, which for you was less of a push to say, I think is
it's huge. I mean,
so big.
Yeah. So and again, who gets enough acknowledgement? So again, when I get people into my office too, it's the little that seem little, I should say. They're not little. Those little things like touch people in ways that you have no idea of how they, just listening to someone talk, to
Yeah.
just touching someone safely. Like those are things that have real power. So yeah, little acknowledgement. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've thought about that. Just like I see usually multiple people every day outside of my family,
Mm-hmm.
friends or just strangers I'll talk to on the phone, connections through the podcast or whatever. And even to do something, this is not external acknowledgement, but even internal acknowledgement, I think many people do this. I just don't have a practice of reviewing every day before I go to bed all of the humans
Right.
and maybe other animals that I like ran across and just thanking them.
Just thanking them, yeah.
Like that seems like it would be a very powerful practice if I could get myself to adopt it. And lays the foundation, the building block for then sending a postcard or writing an email or making a call and being like, dude,
Yep.
thank you.
Right. It's sort of like the placeholder down for thinking about that. Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe just to close us out, that reminds me of a friend of ours. Justin.
Mm-hmm.
Justin's dad lives down the road here.
Yes.
Russ Millen. He does this thing every night. He's in his 80s, and a lot of his friends have died. And he does a thing every night where he thinks about and gives gratitude for all of his friends who have died.
Mm-hmm.
And just, and of course, every year that goes on, that list gets longer, probably more emotional. But just that, I just wanted to share that as a practice for everyone to hear as
Yeah, that sounds wonderful.
what an incredible practice.
Again, by those types of things, we change our own physiology, our own body chemistry. And gratitude that sounds like a gratitude practice of a different sort. Yeah, that's a great one. I haven't actually heard of that one before.
Yeah, it's just, I'd never heard of it either, and it's because it's both grief and gratitude.
Yeah,
and it's almost like that energy that you probably have something wonderful to say about this, but there's this energy in us that expresses itself as grief when we've lost someone. And again, I don't know if I'm using the right words, but that energy could also emerge and be used as gratitude.
Yeah, and it does, right? Yeah, so it does in a healthy semblance of grief, right? Because you can be unhealthy in grief where it becomes, woe is me.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So in a healthy movement, you're going to follow the 5-element system, right? So you're going to have your grief, and it's about letting go at some point, and then you get into this mystery. That's where some of the gratitude of the things that have come to pass, and then move into the new beginning. Yeah, so absolutely, when grief is healthy, all these emotions are healthy in their right movement. But yeah, grief is a hard one though, because we tend to hold on to it when really it's an acknowledgement, and it can be sounds like with Russ, it's actually can be a gift.
Yeah. Okay, well, since you said that, before we go, any tips on letting go and not holding on?
I mean, the number one thing, and this is what I've mostly been interested in the last year or so, is breath. That's the way. It's breathing activity. Changing paying attention to your breathing, and there's lots of different breathing techniques and different traditions and things. For me, it's qigong mostly what I do. And yeah, the breath is the easiest way to change your physiology. It's the only way that we consciously can. It's an organ system that we consciously and unconsciously use, right? So, then the easiest way. The simpleness of this stuff is like what, but it doesn't mean that it's easy because we don't do it. I should just do breathing practice. Well, how many of us just don't do that? Myself, go through different stages. So it would be just simple, deep belly breathing in and out. Spend a minute a day doing that, and you'll change your life. I think it is that simple. And for grief in particular, you're like bringing it in, and then you're consciously letting go.
Is there visualization? Are you thinking about the people, the loss, the grief, or is it just the breathing?
it can be both. It's a yes and type of thing. So you can just do the breathing and it will actually change things, and you can supplement it with, yeah, like thinking of people you love that are gone, and just using the inner, as you're breathing in through your nose, you're just like remembering that person and all like their impact on your life, and then breathing out through your mouth, just letting them go, and thanking them as they move on. So that would be a simple practice for example, but not insignificant. And that the trick to the breathing stuff, and I feel like it's the reason that a lot of people fail at meditation too, is like it doesn't, for the breath work, it's more important to be consistent every day than for the amount of time you do it. If you do it 3 breaths every morning before your tea, that's going to have a huge impact versus feeling guilty that you didn't spend the 30 minutes, cross-legged with your mind completely empty and all of these things. So just a consistent practice is the most important. And again, talking about breathing in particular here, but then letting go of grief. But there's so many different breath work and breathing activities. So the breath is what I find the most interesting now in terms of helping people with many different things.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you like this episode, you can join the 10,000 Heroes Club, our own community of purpose, by clicking the link below this video. You'll never miss an episode, you'll have opportunities to nominate the people I interview and the questions I explore.